Hi everyone, my name's Edwin. I am a software architect by day, but my other big interest is working on and optimizing personal effectiveness and optimizing problem solving and figuring out how to do that best. Specifically, I do this following the philosophy of critical rationalism, which is the epistemology or the theory of knowledge of Karl Popper, and more importantly, the additions and enhancements that David Deutsch has done in the recent decades. Last time we already covered in a video what are the common reasons that critical rationalists such as David Deutsch might have not to want to give life advice, and we covered the 3 reasons for that. So if that sounds interesting to you, I recommend checking out that video. I'll put it in the description. But today we're going to cover something different, namely the process of really understanding what's going on in your mind and figuring out what to listen to. So there's a lot of different inputs and types of knowledge in our minds at all times, and we can use those to infer problems or what to act on. Animals, for instance, they do not have this ability to pause and reflect. If a cow is thirsty, they will just go drink, but if a human is thirsty, we also have the ability to pause and consider, hey, what's going on inside of me, what might be the case, and what can I do about it? Now, to go into the mechanism of how this works in the mind, I'm gonna heavily rely or base this talk on another conversation that's on YouTube between David Deutsch and Luli Tennant. I've watched this video probably more than 20 times and really in detail, taking meticulous notes. It's really a gold mine for understanding more about how the mind works and how we interpret problems. In that video, they distinguish 3 types of knowledge. They do not label them, but for ease of use, I will. In my rendition of this, I hope and intend to simplify maybe the concepts a little bit, give practical examples of how they would apply to life, what are the nuances and where do the differences lie, and generally how we can, in the day-to-day life, apply these insights. Okay, but we'll start by just going over the 3 types of knowledge that we have internally. The first one are statements, what I call, and statements are completely conscious and explicit ideas or thoughts. So they are knowledge that we have inside of us that we can completely or nearly completely articulate. This is, for instance, our plans, our opinions, our goals, our thoughts, anything that kind of comes into our mind and we can articulate and therefore also criticize and dissect and take apart a little bit. This is that first type of knowledge. The second type of knowledge I call intuitions. These are also conscious knowledge, but they are inexplicit. So we cannot articulate it fully in words. We just know how to do it, and a lot of our skills or motor skills are this type of knowledge, like hitting a bat or kicking a football, but also our micro routines and habits, or how we apply grammar rules. All of that we know how to do. There's know-how, there's skills, but it is not explicit or expressible in words, not fully at least. And this is an important type of knowledge that we use for most of our day-to-day actions because we're super habitual. We don't have time to make conscious decisions and cognitive decisions for everything. So we rely a lot on our intuitions. And usually they're actually not conscious, but we can will it to be conscious when we want. It's like when you're walking to a coffee machine, you might be completely at all about it, but as soon as you kind of reflect and question what am I doing, you have an answer. You'll know, oh, yeah, I'm walking to the coffee machine. That leads us to the third type of knowledge, which is what I call drives, and this is all unconscious knowledge. So unconscious means we have no idea of what actually the knowledge's purpose is, what they're there for, what they're doing, how they're influencing us. We do not know. It's unconscious, it's not available to our consciousness. And these are the central nervous system, the drives that we have genetically programmed for that help us beat our hearts and breathe, and some very basic primal instincts like getting hungry, for instance. These are all drives. That doesn't mean that all drives are innate, so it doesn't mean that they're all genetically pre-programmed. We also have a lot of drives that are habitually just turned into unconscious knowledge. For instance, we have maybe a lot of statements that we've just used so many times or believe so deeply in that it just really sinks all the way down to the unconscious and we don't not even aware of them. And the same happens obviously with habits and routines that we just covered, where they just become so habitual that you don't even have a conscious understanding of what's going on. So you might ask, okay, but then by what mechanism can we interact with them, or what can we do with them? Well, unconscious drives, they let us know what's going on via our feelings. So if we touch a hot plate, we will get a jolt of pain. But just a symptom or a side effect of that knowledge being triggered internally. We don't have like really a conscious idea of like what knowledge caused us to feel that pain. In the same way, if we feel sadness, it's always coming from an unconscious knowledge that was there, and we don't know exactly why it was triggered, but that was its way of letting us know, hey, there's something to be sad about. Okay, so now we've discussed the three types of knowledge. Let's try to relate it to the definition of a problem, which was a conflict or a distance between two types of knowledge. So there is a state that you want to be in and a state that it's currently, and the fact that there's a gap there, that is the problem, that constitutes the problem. So all of the types of knowledge that we just discussed can be maybe plotted on a matrix of 3 by 3 on an x and a y axis, and you could then consider like how an intuitive knowledge could conflict with a statement and how a drive could conflict with another drive and how that then amounts to feelings. I want to just run through some examples to clarify that concept a little bit, but I'll also put up a matrix here in the video to show all 6 types of patterns. Let's start with 2 drives in conflict. What's important to note that if it's a drive, it's unconscious. So we don't already have a label for what we're feeling. We just feel bad. Let's just say in our example, we feel bad. That could very well be the case, that there's unconsciously 2 types of knowledge there that are signaling something to us, but they're in conflict. For instance, I can imagine that one might have a fear of failure as one of the drives, and another drive could be maybe an internal guilt of not getting started. So these 2 things are obviously reinforcing, because if you do not get started, then you feel guilty, but if you do get started, then you will feel fear of your results being judged, and this creates this toxic mess, which then amounts to this feeling that is negative that you feel, and that was the product of then these 2 drives being in conflict. Now, how you would uncover that is by questioning or theorizing, okay, what drives may be causing this friction. So when you notice this negative feeling, it really helps to think about what could this unconscious knowledge be and come up with a theory and maybe test that. A second conflict we can consider, which is an interesting one, is maybe between a statement and an intuition. So I love the example of grammar once again. We may know theoretically all of the rules of grammar, but our intuitions can tell us, oh, that actually doesn't feel quite right, that is not correct. There is no rule for it, but we just feel that and know it because we've intuitively used this knowledge or been speaking English so long that we feel it's off. So what this is then a conflict between a statement of, I know this is how the grammar rules work, but still it doesn't feel correct. That gap between it is our problem in that case. Before we explore how we can optimally understand what's going on in our mind and use it in practical examples to solve problems, let's go into some of the common pitfalls or mistakes to look out for. Specifically, rejecting certain knowledge purely based on category. This can manifest itself in 2 ways. You could reject all reason, so the statements, all our explicit and conscious knowledge, and only follow your heart, so to say. So only follow what feels good, do what feels good. This is like a romantic way to live, and taken to its extreme, it's a hedonistic way to live. You do not take serious any part of reality or physical reality, and instead your life is just about pleasure maximization. The second type of categorical rejection is the opposite, where you force away all feelings and emotions and drives and just use pure reason and hyper-rationalism to navigate the world, basically disregarding any form of emotion or intuition because you think the conscious theory of how things work is way more truthful. People sometimes mistake stoicism also for doing this, where you are not your emotions, you don't have to act on your emotions, you don't have to associate with your emotions. That all is good, but it doesn't mean you don't listen to them ever or ignore them. So the clear mistake that is being made in both these cases is that you're judging knowledge based on the category and not on the content. And the proper way to do this is to judge not on the category but on the content of the knowledge. We have so many different types of knowledge inside our mind available, and it is not true that our reptilian brain or our mammalian brain should not be considered anymore. We only should care about our rational thoughts. This is just simply not true. We have a purpose and a use for all of the types of knowledge in our minds, evolutionarily speaking, and therefore we should consider the content of each because they might be telling something significant. It doesn't mean that they are. We can still analyze it and consider, okay, this feeling is just makes no sense in this case, it's wrong. That's completely fine, but at least we are in the moment and considering the content of each theory. Okay, so now let's move on to maybe some practical examples how in daily life we can problem solve optimally. In this example, we'll just stick with one character who is a student, and for instance they wake up on a Monday feeling a bit gloomy and tired, and they consider intuitively, this must be just this typical Monday blues because I partied a little too much or just had a busy weekend. But then if you take that feeling, you take that intuition seriously and you consider if that is truly the case, you may find out, oh, I've actually not been going out partying in a while and I've been sleeping a lot. Well, maybe something else is at play. So then instead of an intuition, actually what you encountered was apparently a drive because you don't have a conscious theory of it. So you have to find out or hypothesize another thing that it could be, because unconscious knowledge be found directly. We have to guess what it may be. Well, in our case, let's say it's quite straightforward. We know we have a couple of friends who are already ill. It probably finally caught up to us, and that is then a good working theory of, okay, why your body is signaling to you, I feel tired and I want to do much today. Well, that is probably because it needs rest. Another example would be the student wakes up on, let's say, a Thursday, and they have this panic, this intuition again of, oh no, the test is already tomorrow and I haven't studied yet. So there's this stress response, intuition. But then they actually take it serious. They question if that's true. They look at explicit knowledge in the form of their calendar, and they see, oh, it's actually next Friday, and then the stress subsides. Whereas the feeling was originally signaling a big problem. The intuition was telling you, I'm expecting there to be a test tomorrow. You renounce this problem entirely by checking and taking it seriously. So you don't have to solve every feeling or problem that comes into mind. Quite often what we have to do is just take note of it, understand what's happening, and that will already resolve the issue. This is actually a non-dualistic way of looking at things. So this is the Buddhist Zen philosophy, where you also take serious your feelings and you can renounce almost all problems by looking at them and not caring about the outcome. I think it's quite interesting, and I would like to explore a bit more how non-dualism and critical rationalism actually converge on this same truth here. But maybe that's for another video. I want to give a third and final example. Let's say the same student has a meetup with their friend group, and the friends suggest, hey, let's go on holiday to Madeira. Immediately you get a feeling of happiness or joy, and this of course signals something positive. In this case you have a conscious theory of what it is, meaning that most likely it was an intuition, and that conscious theory is, I really had it on my bucket list and I wanted to go hiking to Madeira anyway, so this is amazing timing, it's great. This is in contrast to if the feeling did not come with a sense that you could already articulate. If that would have been the case, it would have been conscious drive. And then you would have to basically consider and guess again what that feeling might be. Of course, there's many reasons why you could be happy to go on a nice holiday to Madeira, but you wouldn't have this theory if it wasn't a intuition. Okay, so now we've covered examples of how we can really optimally consider what's going on in our minds and know what to listen to, and that is not to judge based on categories, so don't just follow the heart. Instead, take the content of everything seriously and then base your hypothesis of the problem and therefore also your follow-up action based on your best guess and your criticism, and then you iterate from there. There's actually a lot more we could discuss on this topic, but I will leave that for later videos. Specifically, we could go into how we can grow each of these type of knowledge. What means do we have and abilities do we have to grow our statements or intuitions and drives? And what I mean by grow is just develop them, progress, make them better. Secondly, we could also look at common mistakes. So we have only really discussed today how you should treat the data, but the data itself also can be flawed based on flawed perception and interpretation. But for now, we'll leave it at that. I highly recommend you watch also the video of David Deutsch and Luli Tannet if you get a chance. It was really like I said, a goldmine of a video for me, and I've gotten a lot from it. If you notice some mistakes or inaccuracies in what I've said today, or you have questions about it, do feel free to leave a comment. And if you more broadly want to learn more about critical rationalism, I would recommend reading The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. as a great starter. And if you want to be on the forefront of the new critical rationalist ideas, I recommend following Conjecture Institute. And they have a bunch of very interesting and diverse fellows working on all kinds of theories, from aesthetics to quantum physics to maths and far more. Very interesting stuff. That's all for today. Thank you for watching and hope to see you next time.